Hello and welcome to the Growing Healthy Families podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Haggerty. On this show, I interview the world's top health experts so that you can know with certainty what it takes to give your family a life of epic health and wellness.
As parents, we don't want to see our kids struggle. I knew that he had the potential, and I knew that something needed to be done.
It was hard. We would get frustrated. We didn't know how to deal with it. I was more emotional about it.
Sure that, we're here. Amen to that, brother. Amen to that. Hey, moms and dads, this is Dr. Scott back with the next episode of Dr. Scott's Quick Tips here as a part of the Growing Healthy Families podcast. So, moms and dads, as we struggle to raise healthy kids, sometimes when there becomes school challenges, there are different things that we have to be aware of that can help our children have the best, let's just say, chances of maximum success in school. And so, one of the more common things that we're seeing being diagnosed these days is kids that have issues with ADHD, ADD, the common focus and attention issues that we hear about frequently. And so, moms and dads, let's just talk about the overarching concept of ADHD and what it really means. So ADHD is technically considered to be an inability to maintain focus and attention and self-regulated oneself in a classroom setting for extended periods of time without being disruptive, distracted. And there's a number of different things that go within this. So if you have a child with ADHD, you'll also notice that there tends to be a lot of emotional ups and downs, oftentimes inability to control their behaviors, some socially inappropriate behaviors, a number of different things that live within this. And moms and dads, it can be a very complex thing to manage because the symptoms of ADHD are complex and they're broad. One of the things I want to do is I want to pare it down for you so you understand that, because it is a symptom of a neurological imbalance and it's not like a disease or a disorder, so there are things that we can do to help to improve our children's ability to successfully manage and then overcome ADHD. Now, in my clinic, we work with kids with many different varying severities of ADHD. And, knowing that understanding certain concepts helps us to have a better chance of successfully managing this. So, most commonly used with kids with ADHD is you'll find that there's going to be recommendation for stimulant meds such as Adderall and Concerta and things along that lines. And I encourage you moms and dads to learn as much as you can about the available options for this because for most of you who are considering this as an option, one of the things you need to understand is that Concerta and Adderall, these are stimulant medicines that are an amphetamine. And so it's this double negative effect. You have a nervous system that is being pushed by the sympathetic fight or flight system to, let's just say, be stuck on overdrive, right? Just a million miles an hour, can't shut itself down. And so you use a powerful stimulant so that the brain is able to calm down as a double negative effect. So you amp it up to calm it down. And the effects of the medicines can be very profound. You can see significant improvements in the ability to focus and pay attention. But when the meds come out of a child's system, then we can see significant issues with, let's just say, the crash. As they come down from it, their nervous system and their physiology has been pushed to its absolute limit because they're having to secrete massive amounts of adrenaline, massive amounts of cortisol during the day. And as soon as that medicine begins to come out of their system, all of a sudden their behavior begins to go downhill and their emotions can become very erratic because now they're living with this state where their physiology is completely exhausted. And so I want you to understand that it can be beneficial if a child's dealing with some severe ADHD issues. But from a management perspective, there's a lot of other alternative ways that can be, for the long term, way more successful in helping a child to deal with ADHD because it is a symptom. And it's not a pathological condition. It is a neurological condition that you can help in a number of different ways. And so as many of you may know, in my practice, we work with kids with this all the time. And so the way that we manage it is we go through and we develop care plans where we adjust them on a schedule in a very specific manner that helps us to retrain a child's brain to calm down. And calming down is more profound than what it sounds, because by calming the child's brain down by the adjustment, then over time the child's brain learns how to maintain that. And it helps their brain to rebuild focus and pay attention and emotional regulation. But more importantly, what it does, it balances that child's brain's stress response. A balanced stress response helps the child to be able to maintain focus and attention for increasingly longer periods of time, because now the brain's not tapping into, let's just say, their stress reserves. And so when they can balance how they use their stress reserves, and it takes longer to get there, then they're able to maintain focus and attention for longer periods of time. So within this realm, there's a number of different things that you have to consider. And so, chiropractic, pediatric chiropractic like we use has really great track records. I mean, we get some really powerful results, but some of you may not have access to this, or some of you may never try this. So let's talk about the range of different things that you can look at to help your child. So from the perspective of different technologies available, so one of the things that's very successful is using things like neurofeedback and biofeedback. If you're not familiar with these technologies, so neurofeedback and biofeedback, essentially what they're doing is they're using different types of EEGs or monitoring systems so that they can see when a child's brain is maintaining focus, and then it gives a reward system. So when the child's brain is in focus, it will give a positive reward. And oftentimes, because they're using something like a video, if the child begins to lose focus and the brain now is starting to come out of sync, then what it'll do is it'll start to negatively reward them, which is it'll slow down the program or start to shut down the video or whatever they're watching. So it'll make the child's brain recognize, oh geez, I came out of focus, and then they'll come back into focus, and it'll reward them by playing it again. And it's this positive reward system that gets the brain so that it strengthens the pathways neurologically that allows them to maintain focus and attention for longer periods of time. So great technology. I've done a lot of research on this myself, and all of it shows really good results in helping to, subjectively improve the symptoms of ADHD, the focus, the anxiety, the ability to, maintain attention for longer and longer periods of time. And there's a number of different varieties of technologies out there. I will tell you that if you are going to look into any type of a neurofeedback technology, one thing that you have to have is a technology where it gives real-time feedback by using what's called a QEEG. An EEG is essentially reading what the brain is doing in real time. And so the technologies that tend to have the best overall results are the ones where they've got these real-time feedbacks from these QEEGs, because there are some technologies that are neurofeedback technologies that they're not using a feedback system. So make sure that when you're doing the research, there is a QEEG feedback. And you can ask the company that's using the technology if this is available and how it works, so they can explain to you how it gives feedback and how it measures what the child's brain is doing as they're trying to train them to be able to maintain focus and attention for longer periods of time. Now, keep in mind, moms and dads, these technologies, they're time intensive. They're going to require quite a bit of frequency because the brain does need time and practice. It's about repetitions, repetitions, repetitions. So another technology, and if you've heard our podcast, we talked about BrainTap. I interviewed Dr. Porter from BrainTap Technologies talking about what his technology does, and it gets some really powerful results. And we've been demoing it with a number of kids in our practice, and the feedback overwhelmingly from the moms and dads has been very positive. And this is with us only using a portion of what the technology has available, because we've only been using the audio. We're in a place now where we're going to probably be bringing in the full suite, which is the video and the vibration and the light therapies, because knowing how the brain can be stimulated by all of these technologies in combination with the binaural beats, it can be very profound. And so Dr. Porter has done a lot of the research on this in the clinics that he works with, and the data is overwhelmingly successful in the way that it retrains the brain. And here's the cool part about it is, if you're doing it at home or you're doing it in a clinical setting, the general way that you'll see the child's brain work is that improvements in behavior and increasing lengths of time of focus, but other things like improved sleep, decreases in anxiety, better ability to self-regulate, better decision making, better memory processing, because it's not just training necessarily the areas of the brain that control focus and regulation, it's helping to modulate or control the stress response. As we mentioned before, right, with chiropractic, what we do is we're working with the child's nervous system to calm it down, to also help to retrain the stress response. Well, so coupling things like BrainTap with chiropractic or doing BrainTap alone, it's going to be another very powerful effect, because the BrainTap technology helps to get the brain to, for all intents and purposes, downshift out of overdrive mode. And so the more that you do the brain tap, then the more it's going to train the brain to stay in a more balanced stress state. So it's not going to be stuck at overdrive. It'll help to keep the brain in a place where it's calmer, downshifting the brain more frequently, because it helps to sync up the brain waves. If you've ever heard anything about brainwave research, so when the brain waves are doing what they should, they're in sync and balance, it's like listening to a symphony. So when a child's or an adult's brain gets imbalanced, it's literally noise. And that's what you hear oftentimes, is that a child's brain is basically just dealing with background noise all the time, and that pulls them out of focus. Well, if you can help a child's brain to get into focus by syncing up their brain waves, the effects can be very profound. So, brain tap is a great technology as well. So there are a number of different other techniques you can utilize, like in OT and some chiro settings. They'll utilize things like sensory integration exercises, which are also very helpful, because one of the bigger underlying issues, and this is something that Dr. Robert Malillo talks about in his book Disconnected Kids, are these brain imbalances. And brain imbalances can be something that are minor to major in nature, and ranging from kids who are having mild issues with focus and attention, all the way down the spectrum of kids that have high functioning, all the way down to low functioning autism. And the more pronounced the brain imbalances are, then the more significant the impairments are going to be. And so sensory integration exercises go through doing things like abating primitive reflexes. And if you've got a child with ADHD or sensory issues, you may have heard about this already. But knowing that the part of the brain that controls how we learn and organize and pay attention is called the prefrontal cortex, then the goal of any of these types of sensory integration exercises is you use these external things like sensory integration exercises and movements and proprioceptive exercises, movement-based exercises, from the outside in, to stimulate the brain to start to move forward. Because what they tend to find is that if a child has these what they call retained primitive reflexes, the brain is not as mature as it should be for their age. And so the sensory integration exercises are used oftentimes to help to get the brain back on track, because the retained primitive reflexes literally mean that the brain is stuck in a developmental phase behind where it should be. And these exercises can be very profound. Now, I will tell you that they're not oftentimes the end all be all. We get a lot of kids who are actually sent into us by OTs and PTs that have done primitive reflex work, and moms and dads in many cases that have tried this, and they just get stuck. Where you'll get to a point where the child becomes a bit of a non-responder, and they're not seeing progress with ongoing care. And so, we talk about the combination of the two therapies then, because where we get into the equation with kids that have these types of challenges is we enter something very different into the equation that just cannot be bypassed by doing exercises. Because oftentimes the background noise that the child's brain is actually getting is something that is coming from the level of the spine. And there's this term, I'm going to throw out a really cool term, and Dr. Sam Wang did a research study at Princeton where he discussed this concept of what they call a developmental diaschesis. So the short version means that something affected the child's neck very, very early in life. And we talk about the process of labor and delivery as oftentimes being the trigger, because, let's face it, 87.5% of our children have an intervention as a part of their labor and delivery. And when you're talking about, kids having, positioning issues, and then, having to use forceps or vacuum extractors, or the high rate of C-sections, which, are approaching the 50% mark in the United States, that's a lot of trauma to a baby's neck very early on. But even in, what's considered to be a natural vaginal birth, the amount of force is still pretty significant, ranging anywhere from 20 to as high as 40 pounds onto the baby's neck of axial traction with lateral bending. And axial meaning just lifting them up straight by their head. And that's, think about that. A little baby that has no muscle strength in their neck, having 40 pounds of force on them when they're being born. Think about that, moms and dads. That's the equivalent of, somebody walking into your house, picking the baby up by their head, putting a 40-pound weight on their feet and swinging them around. So I think you can imagine that could have some negative effects. So even in the least complicated of situations, there's a lot of force that goes into the baby's necks. And what that does is developmentally, because the neck is not moving the way that it should, it triggers this response where the brain is not getting the normal calming influences of the motion sensors in the spinal vertebra. And when that happens, what it does, it triggers this background noise to a child's brain that can alter their pace or the effectiveness of their neurodevelopment. And so, as a chiropractor, what we do then is we will introduce adjustments to stimulate that motion sense to return. And so as we go through the care plan, that's my simple goal, is to retrain the spinal vertebra to stay in motion. And by doing so, it helps that child's brain to calm down and reorganize and begin to function more and more and more the way that it was supposed to. If you have a child that's coupling with OT or some other form of sensory integration exercises, the two together are incredibly powerful. We've seen kids where they gotten plateaued in OT, and they come in and they start getting adjusted, and it takes their OT to a whole another level because it helps them to break through the physiological and neurological barriers that the OT was running into. So those are some pretty powerful things. And then, you can also introduce things like, a lot of docs who are specializing in optometry are doing vision therapy. And so, knowing that vision and tracking, when you can train a child's brain to maintain, better tracking through vision therapies, it can also help a child with focus and attention, because if they're not visually tracking and reading the way they should, it's going to affect comprehension as well as focus and attention. So things like vision training can be very, very powerful as well, because it has effects far beyond just the fact of helping them to better process what they're reading, or training the muscles around the eye, but it trains the brain. And it trains the brain in ways that really allow it to reorganize and learn how to focus and learn how to keep its eyes, keep a child's eyes focused on what they should for extended periods of time and track in a specific order. And those little things, when a child's brain is being pulled in a million different directions, those little exercises that are being done on the computers or, through the neurological exercises that the optometrist prescribes, they can have, lifelong pronounced effects that can help them tremendously. I know I co-manage with a number of optometrists that work within this field, and the two effects together are really profound because, it helps the brain to calm down faster, and it makes the effect of what they do significantly more impactful. So, there's a number of different things that you can look at as well. I know a lot of moms and dads are looking into the realm of supplements, using things like probiotics to reestablish the gut flora. That's a great thing, right? Because, the gut flora is crucial for a child to have proper profiles of their neurotransmitters, like serotonin and dopamine, that can only be made in the gut. So if you don't have your child on a probiotic, I encourage you to look at that, because the probiotic profiles, if you don't have a good, healthy gut, then your immune system is affected, your neurotransmitter profiles are affected, and it's essential for a nervous system to function the way that it should to have proper profiles of neurotransmitters. So really important to address that component as well. I get a lot of moms and dads now who are even looking at things like taking CBD oil. And if you're at a place where you're considering looking at using meds, and you're debating back and forth between trying to use something like CBD oil versus using Adderall or Concerta or some other type of stimulant med or a blood pressure med, try the CBD. When it comes down to it, moms and dads, if you're having to weigh the scales of what's going to be something that's going to be the best decision, lowest impact for my child, I would encourage you to look heavily into CBD oil, just because you can do the research for yourself, moms and dads. Putting kids on blood pressure meds, I see it firsthand. It can be some pretty significant long-term issues for that child with unintended effects. The stimulant meds have some pretty significant issues themselves. But anything, CBD oil, the meds, they're all temporary fixes that should only be done in concert with therapies that help the child's brain to get into focus, but it has to be retrained. The meds themselves are not something that your child to be dependent upon, because you're looking at now a lifetime of having to change and bounce meds, potential negative side effects, and all the things that come with that. And I know everybody that's listening here, you want the best health for your child, and you want it in a way that they're going to function at their maximum. So looking at things that you can use to help to manage the symptoms if they're really bad, then these are some good alternatives. But for the long term, you really have to look at retraining the child's brain using the things that we've talked about, because those are the best ways to ensure the child's nervous system develops successfully, the way that it should, so that they can function as they need to in school. There's other things that we didn't touch on too, like there's things like ABA therapy, which can have great effects. There's cognitive behavioral therapies, and we can dig into those in other episodes. And moms and dads, if you want to dig into more specifics on any of these, I'm more than happy to. This is just a small list of what's available, and I will be bringing a lot of those to you in future episodes in quite a bit more depth. But if there's something we touched on here that you'd like to learn more about, make sure that you go to the Facebook page or comment through iTunes or Stitcher, or wherever you're listening to this, that you'd like to learn more about these topics. Because what we want to do is make sure that we're getting you the resources that you need so that your child is going to be able to go and get the best quality of life that they deserve. Because everything here is about giving your family resources so that you can live a life of epic health and wellness. So moms and dads, no matter where you're listening to this, make sure that if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like. If you're listening to us, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Share this with your friends and loved ones. Get this information to them. And then also, we really need you to rate and review us, because if you don't know anything about iTunes or Stitcher, the more you give us feedback, the more that it puts us in front of people who need to hear the lessons that we're putting forth in this podcast. So make sure you rate us. Make sure you go to iTunes or wherever you listen to us and give us a review. And also, honest feedback is appreciated. If there's things that we can do better, we want to hear it as well, because it's all about you guys, moms and dads. Help us grow our mission, pass these episodes on to the ones that you love, and let us know what we can do to try and help you to live the life of epic health and wellness that you deserve. This is Dr. Scott. God bless you guys. Be elite.
Thank you for listening to the Growing Healthy Families podcast, the world's #1 source for health education. Make sure to go to iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a review. Make sure to follow us on social media at the links listed in the show notes, and let us know what area of health you are struggling with, so we can get you and your family on the road to epic health.